Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit and like and subscribe. If you are listening in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we will be taking a look at the Boise State Broncos, who are fresh off a 8-6 season in which they won the Mountain West title and appeared in the Starco Brands LA Bowl. They wrap up their season or their spring practice for 2024 this Saturday, April 20th, which got pushed back a week. Supposed to end originally on April 13th, but they got to be pushed back a week for their OC search. We have a special guest joining us today. Please welcome to the show Ron Counts, a Boise State beat writer for the Idaho Statesman. He can be found on X at Ron_Bronco Beats. Welcome, Ron.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I got to give you your props on your intro videos. I watched a couple this morning and they were hot, and this one was awesome too, man. Got me fired up and ready to go out there and get on the field.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Well,
and of course, you had to get the Statue of Liberty in there. That was
absolutely.
You guys made a lot of fans in Boise with that decision.
That was I don't want to say it put Boise on the map, but I think nationally it maybe put Boise on the map at that point.
Yeah.
So
that in the blue field that put them on the map. That's fact. Yep.
That Smurf turf. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you in a career in sports writing and reporting, and how you got started covering Boise State.
Well, I'm originally from Virginia. Always loved football. Played some in high school. Tried to play in college. Didn't work out so well. Always loved writing, and so it was just a natural fit for me. I've had some really great luck on my beats. I'm a graduate of James Madison University, one of the next up-and-coming Power Fives or G5 powers, excuse me. Go Dukes. I got to cover them for 3 or 4 years. Luckily, I covered them in back-to-back national championship games in 2016, 2017. They beat Youngstown State in 16 and lost to North Dakota State in 17. Moved up from there to the Virginia beat for a couple of years. I was there for the Bronco Mendenhall era, for most of it anyway. Spent a couple of years there covering football and basketball. Luckily, got to cover the men's basketball team winning the national title in 2019. That was an awesome ride. And then in 19, that summer, I got this gig. Got the chance to move across country and come here to Boise. This is a beautiful, amazing city. Cover this awesome program, and I love it, man. I'd love to stay here the rest of my life.
And you recently had an addition to the family, so we want to say congratulations on that, and we're happy to hear the growing Counts family.
Thank you, man. Her name is Amelia. She's amazing.
Amelia, perfect.
She turns 8 months old today, so happy birthday, baby.
That's awesome. Last season Boise State had, in my opinion, like a heck of a roller coaster, right? You go from firing the coach mid-season to winning a Mountain West title. What was that? What was that ride like?
It was a ride, that's for sure. And really, it didn't just start last season. 2022 was a heck of a ride, too. You look at that year, they opened up 2-2 after a terrible loss to UTEP. They fire their OC. They lose their starting quarterback, Hank Bachmeier, to the transfer portal. Dirk Cutter comes in as an interim basis to run the OC. They finished that season 10-4, win the Frisco Bowl. So that was a wild ride. And then last year was just crazy, man. It was, you go through ups and downs in any job, but Andy Avalos, he had a really tough time here. Some of it may have been self-induced. Some of it certainly wasn't. What last season showed us was that, in this new era of college football with the NIL and the transfer portal, players have much more power than they ever did in the past. And B, it is much more easy to lose a locker room than it ever has been in the past. That's what happened to Andy Avalos. There are a lot of unconfirmed reports about what happened in the locker room that I'm not going to get into. But the bottom line is he lost that locker room. He got fired. And it was just it's one of those things where most teams would just tuck their tail and tank and look ahead to next season. But I'll tell you what, the one thing that really came out of that was that Boise State hit a home run with this hire of Spencer Danielson. He wasn't the splashiest name in that search by any means. But you look at the last 4, 5, 6 games of last season, those players played their butts off for him. They all talked about how much they love him. He's always talked about how much he loves them. So you look at Spencer Danielson, I think he's going to be here for many years to come. He's going to be a great coach, and he has what it takes. he has that mentality that he loves the players like they're his own children. They're not just numbers on a roster to him, that they're actual people. He loves them. They love him. And that's what it takes now. It's, that this could be cliche in a lot of ways, but every football team talks about that family atmosphere. That's a real thing here at Boise State. Spencer Danielson brings that, and it's going to be a winning combination for years to come.
And just from the outside looking in, it seemed like his hire was just a key part to kind of maintain the roster as much as they were able to.
Absolutely. And you saw what they lost last year. Eric McAllister, their leading receiver, gone to TCU. Taylon Green, their star quarterback, freak athlete, gone to Arkansas. He's already won the starting job there. Looked amazing in their spring game. So they couldn't afford to lose anything else. They had to keep the rest of this roster intact. They had to find a way to keep Ashton Genty here, and Spencer Danielson did that. You're right. He's just, like I said, he's got the mentality where the players love him.
So despite that roller coaster of a season for Boise State, they had a productive season on the offensive side of the ball in 2023, relying on that strong running game. They ranked 26 in total offense, averaging 436.1 yards per game, 67th in passing offense at 221.3 yards per game, 7th in rushing offense, averaging 214.9 per game, and averaging and 32nd in scoring offense, putting up 32.1 points per game. So let's get to the position where it all starts on the offense, and that's the quarterback. They lost last year's starters. You mentioned Taylon Green, who's off to Arkansas. That sounds like he's going to the SEC, and he's a starting quarterback there. Mm-hmm. They do return Maddox Madsen, who's recovering from, I believe it was a knee injury.
MCL.
So he started and played a lot last year, but got injured. But then they bring in Malachi Nelson, a former 5-star recruit. He transfers in from USC. How is this quarterback room shaping up this spring?
Well, you look at the race to replace Taylon Green, and really, it can be seen as a two-man race between Malachi Nelson and Mad Dog Madsen, but in reality, it's a three-man race. CJ Tiller is still there. He's the redshirt freshman. He was put in a really tough spot last year. His first career start was in the bowl game against UCLA, which had the 10th ranked defense in the country. He struggled there, but he's shown great growth this year. He had a really strong high school career at Rancho Cucamonga High School. He's a talented quarterback, so he's going to be in the mix. But, as we go into the fall, you got to imagine Malachi Madsen probably going to be those top two guys there. Madsen, he hasn't done much this spring. He's done individual drills. He's done 7-on-7 stuff. He had surgery last November to repair that knee. He's expected to be cleared in the fall, so the competition will really pick up then. I'll tell you what, Madsen is one of those guys. He's the type of player that Boise State was built on. You look at some of the greatest players in Boise State history. Kellen Moore wasn't a 5-star recruit. He didn't have a million offers coming out of high school. Leighton Vander Esch played 8-man football, didn't have a million offers coming out of high school. Maddox Madsen is an undersized but scrappy and talented quarterback. He only had 2 offers out of high school, Boise State, New Mexico. But he proved last year that he can play this game. He can play at a high level. He played in 9 games last year. I believe he finished the season with 9 or 10 touchdown passes. He's solid. I think he's going to give Malachi Nelson a run for his money to win the starting job. Now, we talk about Nelson. This is a guy, when you look at him in his pads, he looks a little skinny. You're like, is he really 190 pounds? That they say he is. We'll see if that's really true. But this kid's got a major league arm, man. The first couple of weeks he struggled. He was swimming upstream. He was trying to learn the playbook. These last 2 weeks, his arm has really shined through. This kid's got a deep ball that is sick. He's got great timing, really good instincts. He's not scared to run the ball. He's got good instincts, when to pull it down, when to take a sack. I think he's going to be really, really good. So we don't really know how this race is going to shape up yet until Madsen's healthy. That's the deal right there. But Malachi Nelson's a really talented player. He's going to have a really, really good future wherever he is. But, Madsen is really good as well. So we're going to learn in the fall.
How much do you think it's an issue with Maddox missing this time here in the spring? Do you think that's a huge impact, or like, hey, Nelson can really take that big jump? Because then, media and everybody else is all they see, and they just see Nelson.
It certainly gives Nelson a leg up. But like Dirk Cutter said just last week, he's seen Maddox play this game. He knows that Maddox can play at this level and he can win at this level. So he's not too concerned. So to be honest with you, yes, maybe Nelson has a little bit of a leg up, but Madsen and Nelson are still going to be head to head going into fall camp.
So you mentioned Madsen's recovery going pretty well. Should be ready to go for, you said, the fall, right?
Yep, fall
Okay.
camp. Yep, in August.
So Nelson also had surgery 2 years ago. I believe it was maybe in his senior year on his non-throwing shoulder. And then we never really saw him at USC. Has there been any talk about that? Does he mention anything? Okay.
No, hasn't been mentioned. Hasn't been affected. He's been on the field for every practice. Looks healthy.
Perfect.
All right, move on to that amazing running game, which, like Luke alluded to earlier, was kind of the strength of that 2023 team. They do lose George Line to graduation, but they return Heisman hopeful and, frankly, one of the best, if not the best, running backs in all of college football, in Ashton Jeanty, as well as Breezy Dubar. Did that group just kind of pick up where they left off in 2023 in the spring?
They got even better. It's hard to believe, but they got even better, and they're going to get even better again in the fall. So you mentioned Ashton Jeanty. Definitely going to be a Heisman candidate. He was the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year last year, probably going to be the favorite to win it again this year. He's just one of those guys that is just impossibly athletic and strong and powerful. He's squatting 600 pounds. He's hurdling guys. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a guy who, by all rights, is probably going to be in the NFL draft this time next year. So then let's talk about Breezy Dubar. He came in last season, got a few snaps, really showed what he can do. I mean, he's a big kid, physical, powerful runner. He's one of those guys that doesn't dance in the hole. He hits that hole hard. And I tell you what, the thing about Breezy Dubar, he's like 6'1". He's a couple inches from being a slot receiver. And he's got that kind of, explosiveness, that shiftiness about him. He's going to be a really good number 2 this year. Then, this is why I say they got better. So early enrollee Sire Gaines, I know we're going to talk about him in a few minutes, but he's come in and just impressed the heck out of everybody. You talk about, when Ashton Jeanty got here as a freshman, he looked like a grown man. Sire Gaines is the exact same way. He's 208 pounds, just chiseled, powerful, fast, catches the ball well, blocks well. He's going to get snaps this year. I can almost guarantee it. And then coming in the fall, they have another running back in Dylan Riley, who was one of the fastest players in California last year. He's going to be a compliment there as well. So that running back room is stacked. They're going to, they've got to average 28, 30, 32 carries a game this year. The offensive line is stacked. They got 4 returning starters there. So this offense is going to run through the running game.
Yeah, I think he's running track this spring, right? I think that's probably part of the reason why he's not there. It wasn't an early enrollee. I think just the folks outside of Boise, I think they were kind of, they kind of more, or had heard about Dylan Riley and not so much about Gaines. But I've read things that you've written and others have written about Gaines and how good he's looked at the spring. So that's definitely great news for that Boise State running game.
And he's a guy that had Gaines I'm talking about, had a really productive high school career. I think he rushed for more than 3,000 career yards in high school, tons of touchdowns. He's going to be really good. He's going to be the next dude at Boise State, I think.
We talked about before we started recording, and the Ashton and his Heisman campaign that's kind of already kicked off, right? With these Ashton Jeanty Heisman T-shirts. I think they're even giving out. I don't remember how many it is, but so like the first X number of fans at the spring game tomorrow get those shirts. Do you think we'll see maybe as the season progresses, we might see a billboard there in Times Square at some point?
It's quite possible. For sure, you'll see some billboards in Boise. I don't know about Times Square, but this Heisman campaign is jumping into full effect. Big time. They're the first 750 fans through the gate get the Jeanty T-shirts. That they've got this logo with it's Heisman, but the number 2, which is Jeanty's jersey number, replaces the S in Heisman. There's even talk, and I don't even know if this is legal, but some of the guys even talked about trying to send the Heisman voters gifts during the season to kind of garner some favor with them. So it's going to be a real thing. I think he's going to have a shot at the Heisman for sure. Will he win it? Who knows? I mean, when was the last time a non-quarterback won the Heisman?
He has 2 things going against him. One, he's not a quarterback, and 2, he plays in the G5. But
exactly,
but he's good. But at the very least, I feel like he has a great shot at being one of the finalists there.
Exactly. I tell you what. I mean, if he plays anything like he did last season, he'll be on my ballot for sure. I can guarantee you that. So, he's going to have a great season, and the guys behind him are going to be really good too.
And then, once the media grabs a hold of his background of where he came from and playing football in Italy and all of this stuff, it'll just be this big media dream of like, look at this story, playing football in Italy to a Heisman. I can see that.
And he's really the first big name star in Boise to get a big name NIL deal. Now I say big name NIL deal. That's by Boise standards, but I mean he's getting $300K. He got a car deal. He got a residence for a whole year. So I mean that's way more than any other Boise athletes ever gotten in the NIL era. So they know they have something special.
We talked a little bit. Talk about all the talent they have in that running back room. Can you share with us maybe how you see the split going in terms of like carries? Will it be similar to last season when both Kalani and Ginty were both healthy? Will it be that kind of more of an even split, or will it lean even more towards Ginty?
I think they're going to skew a little bit more towards Ginty. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 25, maybe 30 touches a game. That's rushing and receiving combined there. Breezy Dubar, I can see him getting 10 to 15 touches a game, but they're going to run this through Ashton Ginty as long as he's healthy. But again, I'm just going to say this again. Sire Gaines is going to get on the field somehow, some way. If he's healthy, he's going to play, whether it's 1, 2, 5 snaps a game. Maybe he's returning kickoffs or punts. He's going to find a way to get on the field.
It's definitely exciting to hear.
Mm-hmm.
The passing game certainly had its ups and downs with, we talked a little bit about Eric McAllister entering the transfer portal mid-season, and then they never really seemed to get back on track. They do lose Billy Bowens and Stefan Cobbs to graduation, but return exciting freshman, now sophomore wide receiver Prince Strawn, and bring in a pair of high-profile transfers in Cam Camper from Indiana and former four-star recruit Chris Marshall from Texas A&M by way of
Ole Miss.
And then Kilgore College.
Yeah. How did that wide receiver group shape up this spring?
It's really exciting this year. The toughest thing about losing McAllister is that Boise State in 2022 didn't really have a true number one receiver. There wasn't that guy that they could trust to win a 50-50 ball every time they threw the deep ball. When they lost Khalil Shakir in 2021, they just didn't have a guy to really replace him that next year. McAllister came in. He was that deep threat. He won those 50-50 balls. It's unfortunate what happened with him and him moving on. But there is some excitement in this receiver room. You mentioned Chris Marshall. He's a guy that, he's had some issues in the past. He was dismissed from Texas A&M, he got in trouble at Texas A&M, transferred to Ole Miss, was dismissed from Ole Miss, and then spent a year in junior college. So he's got to keep his head on straight. He knows for a fact that this is his last shot. He's not going to get another chance if he messes up here. So he's got to keep his head on straight. But if he can, man, this kid is a talent. He's got an NFL body. He's got the long arms, good size. I've seen him make 4 or 5 really tough, shoestring catches on the sideline this year. So if he's healthy, he's going to be really good. Cam Camper's been out all spring. He had knee surgery last November. He hasn't been back yet, but looking at his film, he's going to be a guy that's really good too. He's shifty. He doesn't have quite the same frame as Chris Marshall, but he's a little more versatile in my opinion. I think Camper's a guy that can play in the slot or on the outside. He's going to be good for them, I think. And then you have 2 really exciting kind of newcomer receivers, if you will. Let's talk about Prince Strawn. He's a guy who I think, even if Marshall's healthy, could become that number 1 receiver this year. He's just got that much natural talent. He's 6'5", probably 215, 220, catches the ball just beautifully. I've maybe seen him drop 1 pass this spring. He's a great deep threat. He's got NFL bloodlines. His older brother Michael played for the Colts, now plays for the Panthers. And Strawn is he's just one of those kids that looks the part. He looks like he could go to the NFL. And then another one that's had really a tough story, a tough journey in college football is Austin Bolt. He's a local kid, played at Bora High near Boise State, had a really gruesome leg break in 2022 in the season opener. Took him more than a year to come back, but he showed what he can do at the end of last season, showed he can catch the deep ball. And Dirk Carter said he's had the best spring of any receiver on the team this year. So I think there's going to be big things for Austin Bolt this year. And then you look at some other guys that I think are going to play roles in that receiving game. Chase Penry is a guy who transferred in from Colorado last year. He was slowed by injuries last year, but he's a guy that could really get in there and see some time in the slot. He's had a good spring. And Latrell Caples is healthy again this year. So Caples was their leading receiver in 2022. He had 54 catches, almost 600 yards. Really solid guy. Not the biggest receiver in the world, but a scrappy guy that can play slot and on the outside some. He can do some end arounds. He's a really good athlete. So I would say this year, wide receiver wise, there's two guys that are competing for that number one spot, Prince Strawn and Chris Marshall, but there's way more depth than there has been in the last couple of years. So that's exciting to see.
And I think this was back in 2022. I talked to somebody within the program, and I just asked them who the best athletic freak was, and they said Austin Bolt. I think at that point he was playing tight end, or maybe more so in that tight end department. I was like, oh, really? And they're like, he might be the fastest guy on the team back in 2022. I don't know, coming back from
he was
the same.
Austin Bolt's a really impressive athlete, and part of that position change has been part of his journey, because he was a wide receiver and quarterback in high school, was the Gatorade State Player of the Year in Idaho, came to Boise State, they moved him to tight end. Then he actually spent a season at defensive end. Then he moved back to tight end. Now he's a wide receiver where he belongs. And he's an athletic freak. You should see him play basketball. I mean, he's one of the best basketball players on the team. He's got ridiculous dunk skills. I mean, he's an athletic freak. So he's going to have a good year this year.
Did you talked about Cam Camper's injury. When do they kind of expect, surgery from last year? When do they kind of expect him to be ready? And are things progressing the way they would expect? Or
it seems like it. We haven't really had an update on him, but before spring started, Coach Danielson said they expect him back for fall camp. So if as long as he's healthy by August 1, they'll be fine. And I think, like I said, I think he's a guy that finds a role in this offense. I mean, obviously there's only so many passes to go around, but he's so versatile. They can put him in the slot. They can put him outside. He's going to see some times.
I could see him maybe kind of slow playing him, bringing him back, because you talk about this wide receiver depth. And I honestly think Boise has playoff aspirations. So, hey, let's get healthy and, be playing and hitting at all the top cylinders when you come to playoff time, I think.
Absolutely.
Moving over to the offensive line, they do return a lot of last season starters in Cage Casey, Mason Randolph, Roger Caron, and Ben Dooley, but they also lose Cade Beresford, Garrett Kern, and Ethan Card. How did that group look in the spring? Really,
really good. Really good. Now, a couple of those guys have been out this spring. Mason Randolph's been out. Roger Carrion's been out. They're both expected back for fall camp. But that line is going to be really, really good this year. I mean, you look at what Cage Casey did last year at left tackle as a freshman, and he's just a workout warrior. They love him in the weight room. They love his mentality. Ben Dooley is probably going to win that job at the left guard. Ben Dooley is he's one of those guys. He's the leader of that line this year, and he's played everywhere. He's played right guard, left guard, right tackle. He's a former state champion wrestler. I mean, probably Boise State's best chance to get a lineman drafted next year is Ben Dooley. Mason Randolph's another versatile guy. He can play guard or center. He's been really good. Roger Carrion came in last year, and really he got on the field because of injuries to Dooley last year, but he's played really, really well. So right tackle is really that only spot where they're looking for a starter. And they got two young tackles working for that spot, Hall Smith and Kyle Cox. Hall Smith's a redshirt sophomore. I believe Kyle Cox is a redshirt freshman. Cox, the coaches tell me he's a freak in the weight room too. They've loved him since he got on campus. But Hall Smith has seen most of the snaps at right tackle this spring. So I would expect tomorrow in the spring game to see him start there.
In the past, tight end production has been hit or miss. Probably Austin Bolt's been the best tight end production, as we talked earlier. But what can we expect from that group here in 2024? And does anyone kind of stand out so far?
I think one of my, hottest takes for this season is that the tight end position is going to have a huge time role in this offense, more than it has probably in the past decade. Matt Lauder is a player that they're really, really excited about. He's really athletic, really explosive. There aren't a lot of tight ends that can stretch defenses vertically, and Matt Lauder is a guy that can do that. I mean, you go back and watch his high school film, and it's just acrobatic catch after acrobatic catch. So he's going to have a really big role. And then they have another young redshirt freshman named Matt Wagner, who is the same mold as Matt Lauder. Really, probably 6'4", 6'5", can go up and make those high catches, can really stretch the defense. He was originally committed to North Texas, but Boise State flipped him late in 2022. 2022. I think tight end is going to have a huge role this year. I can see those guys. I can see Matt Lauder topping, 25, 30, 35 catches. But more importantly, I can see him stretching that defense and really opening things up for the other receivers.
All right, this next question is going to be hard because we've talked about a lot of players and a lot of exciting players with a lot of potential this coming year. If you had to pick one offensive player to kind of have a breakout season in 2024, who would that be?
Yeah, there's so many options. I mean, Breezy Dubar is an easy choice. Austin Bolton, Prince Strong are both easy choices. But I'm going to go Latrell Caples. This is a guy that he showed in 2022 that he can be very productive in this offense when he's used the right way. When they motion him, when they move him around, when they play him in the slot, when they play him outside, when they get him the ball, he has the athleticism to make things happen. So he's an undersized, scrappy guy, but he brings an intensity that they just didn't have at the receiver room last year. So I think I can see him, with 40, 50 catches again this season. And I can also see him winning the job at punt returner and doing a much, much better job in that role than they had last year.
All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. The 2023 team wasn't up to the normal high standards at Boise State in recent years. They ranked 72nd in total yards allowed, giving up 385.1 yards per game, 18th in sacks with 2.57 per game, 40th in rushing defense, giving up 134.8 yards per game, and 110th in passing defense, giving up 250.4 yards per game. What did the Broncos do this offseason to try to improve that defense, and how did that unit look this spring?
Well, as you're looking at Boise State's defense, I would caution people to kind of look at the end of last season. Look at the last 4 games of the regular season in the Mountain West Championship and see what they did. When Spencer Danielson took over, this defense was just different. And I don't know what that says about Andy Avalos and what he was doing, but this defense just played different. They were more aggressive. They got after the quarterback. They forced turnovers. And, take out the bowl game against UCLA. Those last 4 games were really, really good. So this year, the top 2 focuses have been creating more turnovers because they only created 19 last season and getting more sacks. They need someone to pair with Ahmed Hassanin on the other side to really, get after the quarterback. Hassanin is a really good athlete, a freak athlete, had 12.5 sacks last season, but he can't be at his best when he's facing double teams every play. They got to have somebody else to come on there. So they're looking for that pass rusher. There's a good chance to transfer named Tavion Woodard from Ball State. He came in with I believe it was 20 career starts, 10.5 sacks. I think he's gonna play a big role for them this season. And then turnover wise, they really kind of studied what other teams have done. So in the offseason, Boise State's defensive staff met with the staffs from Clemson and from Middle Tennessee State. Both of those programs had really good years the last couple of years in creating turnovers. And they just learned new ways to teach turnovers. They learned some new drills. They learned how to make it more intentional in practice. And they've done a great job. According to Eric Chinander, their defensive coordinator, they forced more than 20 turnovers just in these 15 or 14 practices in spring. So if they can carry that into the season, they'll be doing well.
You kind of touched on the defensive line there a little bit. Other than Woodard, did anyone else kind of stand out and kind of step up along that defensive line?
Yeah, there's a young D tackle who I don't know how many snaps he's going to see this year, but a young guy named Michael Madry, redshirt freshman. He wears number 99, which is a famous number at Boise State. Scott Matlock wore it. A lot of great players have worn that number. He's going to be really good. It may be not next season, but the following year because they have so much depth at the line there. I mean, you look at what they have back from last season. Sheldon Newton is back at nose tackle. Herbert Gums, Michael Callahan, Braxton Felly, all 3 of those guys saw a lot of playing time last year. So there's only so many snaps to go around. So I would say, Callahan, he's been out a little bit this spring, but Herbert Gums has really looked good. And he's a guy who's got a really interesting story as well. Herbert Gums right now is a 300-pound nose tackle. In high school, he was a 250-pound running back. This kid was just a freak athlete in high school. It's not often you see that transition. So he's still got that explosiveness. We talked to him last week and he said he feels better than he has at any point in his career. So he's looked really good. But yeah, I would say Madry, if he can get on the field some this year, he has a chance to pop because he's just explosive. He's long. He's strong. He can be disruptive in there.
You think Woodard's going to be the kind of guy lying up on the other side of Hassanin?
I think so. I think so. Woodard is more of a true defensive end, where Hassanin is kind of that hybrid DN outside linebacker,
edge guy.
Yeah. So I think Woodard wins that starting job easily. I mean, they brought in a transfer from Utah last year named Tyler Weggis that didn't really work out there. They got a young guy named Jaden Virgin Morris who's promising, but I'm not sure he's polished enough for that job. So I think Woodard is probably the favorite there. All the coaches have raved about him this spring, so I think he wins that job. But they just, whoever it is, they got to find someone to pair with Ahmed Hassani, because everybody knows who Hassani is now. Everyone is going to double team him. They're all going to run away from him. They're going to find ways to take him out of the game. So you got to have a second option.
Yeah, I think Woodard, I mean, to me, showed a lot of promise last year at Ball State. So he's very excited to kind of see what he can do there at Boise.
The linebacking group returns their second leading tackler in Andrew Simpson, but they do lose DJ Schramm to graduation. How did that linebacking group look this spring?
I would say linebacker is one of the deepest positions on this team. I mean, there are some young guys that are very talented that, we're keeping our fingers crossed and aren't going to hit the portal here in the next few days. But you mentioned Andrew Simpson. Let's start with him. I mean, he's going to win the middle linebacker job again. And that kid's people know Andrew Simpson now. You look at what he did just in the last half of last season while he was playing with a broken hand. He was just so disruptive. I think he finished the season third in the team in tackles. He's a natural pass rusher. He's really, really solid for them. That weak side backer position is going to be a bit of a competition this year. But my guess is that Marco Notriani wins that job. So they're having to replace one of their most experienced linebackers in DJ Schramm, who was a great story. He didn't crack the starting lineup until he was a fifth-year senior, and then he went on to put together 2 all-conference type seasons. So he had a great story. But Schramm was banged up a lot last year. I think he missed 4 or 5 games. Marco Notriani came in and played for him, and Notriani was the team's leading tackler through 5 games, I believe it was. I think he had 53 or 54 tackles before he got hurt. So he's a guy that has natural instincts. My guess is that he wins that job as the weak side backer. Now their backups are really talented as well. Jake Ripp is a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore, that the coaching staff loves. He's been really aggressive this spring. He's hitting guys. He's forcing turnovers. He's going to see some playing time. And then the other middle backer, Chase Martin, he was one of the team's best special teamers last year. He led the team, led special teams in tackles. He's a hard hitter. He's still pretty raw, but I can see him getting some playing time there. And they brought in a JUCO guy named Udoka Eziani, and he's the fastest linebacker on the roster. A little undersized. I think he's only 215, 220. But, he's been disruptive in their first 2 scrimmages of the season, so I can see him getting some playing time there. So Simpson, Notriani are those top 2 guys, but there's so many options there at linebacker. You look, Deshaun Misa was a 4-star recruit, a couple of years ago, and he hasn't seen the field. Wyatt Milkovich was a guy that everyone was excited about. He hasn't seen the field. So there's tons of options at linebacker.
Moving over to the defensive backfield, and they were some of the top returning production last year in terms of tacklers. They returned leading tackler safety Alexander Tubner, third leading tackler Seyi Oladipo, and fourth leading tackler Rodney Robbins all returned. They do lose cornerback Jalen Clark to a transfer. How did that unit look this spring?
Really, really deep. So that safety and nickel room is super deep. You've essentially got 5 guys competing for 3 spots. But they're going to mix and match a lot of guys this year because, if you noticed last season, Boise State played a lot more dime, especially late in the season to slow some of these spread teams down. We're going to see a lot more of that dime look this season. So let's talk about some of those guys. Alexander Tubner is their leading tackler from last year, defensive MVP of the Mountain West Championship game. Really solid tackler, a little bit of an undersized guy. Sometimes he can be a bit of a liability in coverage, but I imagine he wins that field safety job again this year. Rodney Robinson is one of the most experienced guys on the roster. Another undersized kid, but he plays hard, plays with a chip on his shoulder. Also can be a liability in coverage at times, that we saw last season. But I would imagine, starting day, he's your starting boundary safety. Here's the rub. You have 2 young guys that are really pushing for playing time. So Ty Benefield is a guy that started games last season. I believe he started 4 or 5 games last year as a freshman. Long kid, he's 6'2", probably 215 pounds, good hitter, covers a lot of ground. He's going to see a lot of playing time again this year, whether it's safety, nickel. They're going to get him on the field. And then you look at the other safety spot. The backup is going to be Zion Washington. And I call him a backup, but this kid's going to get on the field as well. He's, every bit of 6'3", probably 220, a physical kid, covers good ground as well. So I can see him getting some playing time. Shea Oladipo, the starting nickel, is one of my favorite players on this roster. You've never met a more talented but humble kid. You know, his dad is a preacher. He lives that life. You know, he's really open about his faith, but he's also a really talented football player. I mean, you look at his freshman year, in his first start, he had 2 interceptions. Like this kid just has ball skills for days. So I think he, you know, is going to be a really special player again this year. He has that knack at nickel, you know, because he's so physical tackling, you know, that he's going to get a lot of playing time. He's going to see a lot of tackles. But they have another young man coming in at nickel this year in Koanohi Kaniho, who was a corner the last several years. He's transitioning to nickel this year. Another, you know, really talented tackler, a guy that's really good man-to-man coverage. So I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you here, but we're going to see a lot of guys see time there. I mean, all 6 of those guys that I mentioned are going to see playing time somehow.
Oladipo, I think, is someone, especially has a good year, that we can be talking about for NFL draft as well from Boise.
Quite possibly, he's one of those guys in the NFL that's going to be a bit of a tweener. You know, I don't know if he's explosive enough to be a corner. I don't know if he's quite big enough to be a true safety in the next level. But I mean, you never know. You know, I mean, like I said, those ball skills are legit. He's a really, really good tackler.
Can you tell us how California transfer Jeremiah Irby looked in the spring and what kind of role maybe we can expect for him in 2024?
Jeremiah Irby has absolutely stolen the show this spring. I mean, he's one of the top 2 cornerbacks on the roster. Absolutely. He's accounted for 6 interceptions this spring, 2 of which came in their second scrimmage. I mean, again, he's a guy with ball skills. He's a guy with good size. He's a physical player. So if everything stays as is, your starting corners next year are Amarion McCoy, who led the team with 3 interceptions last season, and Jeremiah Irby. Those are your top 2 guys. So I'd be shocked at this point if Irby doesn't start.
So we've talked about a lot of defensive names. It seems like there's a lot of names that are going to be in and out of this lineup. We got depth. You have to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024. Who's your defensive breakout?
So this is another tough one. I mean, obviously, you know, Hassanin had his breakout year last year. You know, Irby is a very easy choice, but I'm not going to go the easy route here. I'm going to go a young man that I mentioned a little while ago, Jaden Virgin Morgan. You know, a long athletic edge. You know, he didn't have a sack last season, but he's one of those guys that was one step from having so many sacks. He was in the backfield all the time. He had 2 fumble recoveries last year. Both were deep in the backfield. So he's got that natural ability to beat a blocker. He's got a really good first step. He's really, you know, kind of figuring out the mental side of the game. I think this season, even if he has to share snaps with Woodard, I think he comes out and has 4 or 5 sacks and really helps that defensive front.
We haven't done this to this point, but this feels like the right time to talk about special teams. we haven't done that in the past episodes, but we just couldn't let this episode go by without doing it. So they return James Ferguson Reynolds, an Australian punter, who I believe led the FBS in punt average in 2023 at 49.73 yards per punt. Is he ready to boom him again in 2024?
Absolutely. JFR is, I mean, you know, it's not often that you have a punter who's a fan favorite, but here in Boise, the people love JFR. He's got his own fan section at games. But there's a guy that dresses up as a kangaroo and holds up a signed JFR for Heisman at every game. Like, people love him. He's a talented punter. You know, the last 4 or 5 years, everyone in college football has gone to that Aussie punting style because of what it offers, right? It's easier to directional punt. It's easier to set up a fake, and we saw it. JFR pulled off a successful fake last year. He threw a pass to Andrew Simpson to convert it for a first down. I expect to see that a couple more times this season, but I'll say this. JFR, James Ferguson Reynolds, deserved to be on the Ray Guy Award ballot last year as a finalist. He deserved to win that dang thing, and he didn't win it. He's my favorite to win it this year.
And we can't forget about our other kicker. We've got Jonah Dalmas, who statistically has been one of the best field goal kickers the past couple of years. And I think maybe he just inked himself an NIL deal. I think maybe I saw him with a new vehicle. How was he this spring?
Awesome. You know, you talk what a great story Jonah Dalmas is. After high school, he goes on a 2-year LDS mission. He walks on at Boise State, but he didn't just walk on like everyone else does. Jonah Dalmas emailed the coaching staff, and he got himself a 4-day tryout with the team when Brian Harsin was the coach, made the team, earned a scholarship that first year, and now, I mean, he has a chance to be not just the greatest kicker in Boise State history, but one of the greatest in NCAA history. So Dalmas already owns the Boise State career record in career field goals. I believe it's 89. I may be a little bit off on that number, but it's in the 80s. He only needs 4 field goals to set the Mountain West career record. He only needs like 17 or 18 to set the NCAA record, which is 97. It was set in 2022 by Ryan Dunn from NC State. So Dalmas this year has a chance to walk out of Boise State with the Boise State record, the Mountain West record, and the NCAA record. And he's a former walk-on. I mean, what a cool story that is. Great kid, really humble. He's really special.
It might be tough. They might be scoring too many touchdowns to get field goals.
It's true. But you look at the last 2 years, he's kicked more than 25 each of the last 2 years. So if he does that again, he's got those records.
I saw a pretty cool video. I think it was yesterday of him practicing onside kicks, and it was kind of like, is there anything he can't do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's solid, man. The one thing, if we're going to talk about special teams, and I'm sorry if you were going to do this next, but we got to talk about the return game, which was non-existent last year. And that's been a bit of an epidemic in college football. The way things are now, there's so many fair catches and punts, there's so many fair catches and touchbacks and kickoffs. But Boise State's a program that was known for its special teams for so many years. You look at Avery Williams, who's a 2-time Mountain West Special Teams Player of the Year, now with the Atlanta Falcons. They've always had that dynamic kick returner, and they just haven't had the last couple of years. Some of the options this year for kick return, look at a guy like Caden Dudley, a former wide receiver, now is a running back, really shifty. It was probably their best returner last year before he got hurt. There's another walk-on named Troy Wilkie, who's an undersized kid, but really fast, really scrappy. I think he's going to see some time there. I mentioned Caples as a possible punt returner. How about this? And tell me how crazy this sounds to you guys. Ashton Genty has been back there returning punts this spring.
Wow. That definitely seems crazy.
Exactly. That's the response that you should have from that. Your Heisman Trophy contender should not be returning punts, but that's what Boise State does. The last couple of years, they had George Holani returning punts when he was their best running back. So it's a risk. It's a risk reward situation. Yeah, Genty's maybe the best player on the field. Maybe he can make a big play, but maybe he also tears that ACL. It's scary to see, but it could happen.
I mean, the last electric guy I really, really remember, other than maybe, you got Zachariah Branch over at USC right now, Reggie Bush. I mean, he did returning, punts and kicks, and those were always electric. Yeah. And I don't know, worked for them.
San Diego State had a running back a few years ago that went to the Seahawks.
Oh gosh, he never really panned out in the NFL.
He was a really dynamic punt returner too. I can't. I don't have enough functioning brain cells to remember that name. So, another name to keep an eye on, especially this year, is Chase Penry. I mentioned him earlier. He returned a lot of punts when he was at Colorado. So they could have him out there doing some of that as well.
With spring practice kind of coming to a close tomorrow, which position group or groups do you think are the most concerning at this point?
I would still say it's kind of tough because defensively there's so many returners coming back. I would still say it's that defensive end edge kind of number 2 pass rusher to Ahmed Hassanin, because there's just no one proven there yet. Hassanin was the first Boise State player to finish the season with more than 10 sacks since 2019. They just haven't had that complementary piece. So until that guy shows up, I would think that would be the position I would think. I talked about that field safety position a little bit last year. Really both those safety positions, those guys did get burned in the passing game a lot. I mean, when you open up against Washington in that offense, it's hard not to get burned in the passing game. But all season, those guys were giving up, were getting beat one-on-one. So there's still some concern there, but I don't think they would go transfer portal to fix that. They've got so many young guys at safety. I would say if there's a chance where they bring in somebody to transfer portal still, it's a really good pass rusher. If there's a good edge rusher out there, maybe he comes in still.
All right. We've got a lot of strengths. If you had to pick the number 1 strength of this Boise State team here in 2024, what would that strength be?
It's the running game for sure. I mean, we talked about the O-line. It's 4 returning starters in the O-line. You got a Heisman hopeful. You got John Braze Dubar that's really, really solid and really strong. And you got 2 really good freshmen, and I haven't even mentioned Caden Dudley. Caden Dudley's a guy that's probably going to find a way to get some snaps this year. I mean, last year when he was healthy, they give him 2 or 3 end arounds a game, and he can make something happen. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this be the top And get this, even in a conference that includes Air Force, I wouldn't be surprised to see Boise State's rushing game to be the top of the conference next year in the Mountain West.
We touched on this a little bit, but when it comes to recruitment of new players and kind of retention of existing players, how would you say the NIL transfer portal has kind of changed how Boise State does things?
So much, just like every team in college football. It's just, I mean, really, the focus right now isn't on recruiting outside players. It's on retaining your players. You got to find ways to do that, and it's tough in a place like Boise. Boise's a small market; they can't afford $1 million NIL deal. It's just not going to happen here. So I mean, it's tough, and there's so much tampering going on behind the scenes right now. NIL has opened that up. You've got a third cousin removed, DMing some kid going, hey, Alabama wants to pay you $1 million. What are you doing at Boise State? So there's just, the NCAA has got to find a way. The NCAA has got to grow some cojones and actually set a rule, that they can't keep just caving to all this stuff. I know they're scared about lawsuits and all this kind of, labor dispute stuff, but they've got to make a rule because it's just crazy right now. It's fans right now, this is a different college game than I grew up with. I'm only 40 years old. It's not like I was, born in the Stone Age, but nowadays it's hard for fans to really connect with their favorite players because they're not going to be here next year. They're just transferring all the time, and so it's just so hard. Boise State's done a good job. I'll say this: Spencer Danielson, the way he loves on those kids, the way those kids love him, he's minimized the damage. But we're just holding our breath. The spring game's tomorrow. Someone could be in the portal Monday morning. You never know. Maybe CJ Tiller gets told, "Hey, you're not in the quarterback race." He's gone Monday morning. Prince Strong, maybe you're not going to get as many passes as you thought. He's gone Monday morning. It's just you're just holding your breath and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think
it was. Oh, go ahead.
I think the NCAA is kind of painted, or they're going to get painted into a corner, and it might not be the corner they want because of their lack of just making a decision. Like you said, these lawsuits. It's kind of like the way I kind of viewed it was, they had one lawsuit attacking them. They're attacking it from different angles, and so and they're losing all around. And at some point, they need to decide which path they want to go and make a stand, right? Otherwise, the path's going to be, decided for them.
Yeah.
And
they're just making it so much worse for themselves now. Now they're about to approve this unlimited transfers and immediate eligibility, so there's no penalty for transferring anymore. I mean, to me, that is the easiest fix to this situation. Go back to the old system. If you're transferring from one FBS to another FBS, you got to sit out a year. That's going to make kids think twice about transferring so much.
I mean, I think where it's headed, and again, this isn't great from a college athletic standpoint, but I think where it's headed is they're going to be employees of the university, and they're going to sign some kind of contract, and they're going to be, if they violate that contract, they don't stay there for 3 years. There's going to be, stipulations, all that kind of stuff. I think that's where it's headed.
Selfishly, if that does happen, I hope, like the NFL, they build in some media requirements in those contracts. That way, nobody can say, "Hey, I'm not talking to you today," or "I'm not coming to the press conference."
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be a board or association to kind of negotiate that. Absolutely.
The other part, being in G5 football, like you mentioned, hey, we don't have the money for $1 million. Where you might go to another G5 or definitely P4 team that all right, yeah, we're just. We're Ole Miss. We're going to give you $1 million, and you're going to be a third stringer. I don't know. It's if you just had a hard cap, whatever. $1 million is the most you can have, or 500,000. That way, even the small market teams can still maybe get a big player that, hey, they want to go into the system or whatnot, and I don't care that whatever, I'm going to Boise and I could be at whatever Texas A&M. I think if you just put a cap at it, and then people know, okay, well, I'm assuming there's locker room chatter about how much money I'm getting and this and that, and you're like, okay, more money typically means more opportunity or a longer leash, but it's like, hey, this is the cap. I think people can maybe handle that roster a little bit more, and kind of getting into that, it seems more and more like the demands of a head coach is turning more into a general manager or a CEO type, and they have to recruit. They have to work on, like you said, the retention of the players, do fundraising. Great day to be a Bronco. You see those tweets,
built different.
Built different. there's less, it seems, of that X's and O's roles, and maybe it's just from the off season and we haven't really got into the nuts and bolts of the season yet. Do you see that trend happening at Boise State? And if not, how have they kind of addressed that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, coaches and college coaches now are not coaches anymore; they're CEOs, and it's been that way for a long time in the NFL. I mean, this is college is kind of adopting that same model. But you're right. I mean, you can't, as a head coach right now, you have too much on your plate to be in there and worry about X's and O's. And we saw some of that in the Andy Avalos era. Like he was very much hands-on with the offense and with the defense, and was making some of his coordinators run the plays, run the things that he wanted to run, and it just didn't work anymore. So as a head coach, you've got to focus on player retention, fundraising, and PR. That's what it is now. You're the face of the organization. You're the head of the company, and that's what it's got to be. You're not out recruiting anymore, which is tough because Spencer Danielson's a really talented recruiter, but he's just got too much on his plate now. It's just the way it is in college football now.
So Boise State has a long, storied history of success. They've had some up and down seasons and still found success recently. What, at the end of the year, what does success look like for Boise State in 2024?
It always looks like a Mountain West championship. The fans here expect that every year. That's the goal every year. But this year, it goes way beyond that. I mean, we've talked about how exciting this roster is. What better time to have a great team than in the first year where the CFP expands? This year they have a chance to win that conference title and actually play for a national championship. When was the last time a G5 team could say that? Never, probably, right?
Well, I guess Cincinnati, but then they moved up, right? Like exactly. Next year.
Exactly. So they have a real lane, a real map to a national title this year. All they got to do is win that Mountain West championship, be the highest ranked G5, team. And hey, it's not going to be easy. They got Oregon this year. That's more than likely going to be a loss. But I still think an 11-1 Mountain West champion is in that conversation for that last playoff spot. So it's going to be exciting this year. Fans expect a championship. Fans expect the postseason here. Fans expect 10 plus wins a year here. Boise, to me, in some ways, Boise is a town that is stuck in the past in a lot of ways. They still think Kellen Moore is walking into the building every day and they're going to blow everyone out. That isn't the reality anymore, but that's still the expectation here because this is such a football town. This is always going to be a football town. The basketball team is doing great things. Leon Rice is really building that thing, but this will always be a football first town, and those expectations are always going to be through the roof.
Is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this Boise State football team going into the 2024 season?
No, I mean, I think I think we've covered it all. If I had to predict what was going to happen with them next year, and obviously, this isn't taking into account transfers and injuries, but I think they lose that game in Oregon, but they still have a chance to go 10-2 at worst. They have Oregon State and Washington State both on the roster this year, on the schedule this year, but neither of those teams are the same as they were last year. Washington State lost a lot to the draft, a lot to the portal. Oregon State just lost its best running back to the portal. So those teams they're going to be very beatable this year. So I think 10-2 at worst is a very attainable goal for them.
Well, thank you again, Ron, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. We are very appreciative of it. Thanks
so much for having me. Have me back on anytime. Happy to do it.
All right. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like button and the subscribe button. And if you're listening to in podcast form, please rate and review. Only 5 stars. We only want 5 stars. Just give us the 5 stars. If you don't, give us a transfer portal. Get us that 5-star. Whatever you need on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until next time, we are the G5 Hive.